Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where we recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 16th of November, 2023. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So kicking off today's episode, we have an interesting new post here from Peter, who is the team lead at Go Ethereum, or Geth here, and this is all about client diversity. So he basically shared this on Twitter saying, pushing for client diversity is all the rage in Ethereum, with horrible repercussions if it doesn't get better. What if we could solve the issue while letting people run whatever client they prefer, without a hard fork and shippable in a couple of weeks? And apparently we can. So there's this post here, it explains basically what Peter's going on about, and I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to check out. But essentially, the gist of it is basically being able to verify what other clients are seeing without having to run the clients yourself. So essentially, what would happen would be, if you're running Geth, you would be able to verify through some kind of like means that would be built into the clients what the other clients are seeing when it comes to the blocks being proposed, and verify that it's the same as what you're seeing. And that is my understanding of it and the gist of it. And this is and you're doing it in a stateless way, which means you don't need to be running the clients yourself in order to, or running multiple clients yourself in order to verify these things. At least that's my understanding there. Now, of course, there's a bit of discussion that has been spurred on by this, with a bunch of people jumping in to the discussion, people talking about how this is doable with Verkle trees, and is at the heart of the EIP, because Verkle trees is part of the Verge upgrade, which is getting Ethereum kind of ready for statelessness and light clients and things like that. But I thought it was just an interesting thing, because I've talked a lot about client diversity on the Refuel before. Obviously, it's super important for the chain to be diverse on the client side of things. When it comes to client diversity, we're very good on the consensus layer side, where we originally, if you remember, had Prism that was pretty high, but then that came down a lot, and now we have a pretty good, a pretty good distribution of clients on the consensus layer side of things. I mean, if I go to the clientdiversity.org website, you can actually see what this looks like here. I'll bring it up on the screen for you to see. You can see, yeah, I mean, Prism's still obviously leading here, but it is a lot less than what it was. It is not over any of the critical thresholds. And then you can see, there's different data sources as well. There's Sigma Primes, Blockprint, Mega Labs, and Rated.network. I guess most of them they're pretty similar. I think that Mega Labs is the most different, where it's got Lighthouse as the dominant client and Prism as not the dominant client, as a second client here. But generally, it's pretty close. Rated.network is pretty close to Sigma Prime's Blockprint here, where it's got Prism at about 43% client share, Lighthouse at 33%, Teku at 16%. That's pretty, I think that's the highest it's ever been. Then Nimbus at 5.7%, Lodestar 1.2%, and then there's others there. But then if we look at the execution layer side of things, it's still dominated by Geth, right? And now keep in mind, this data is self-reported, and this is only covering about 60% of the network. I remember I described to you guys, or explained to you guys, that this data basically is being sourced from staking entities that have reported what they're actually running, what execution client they're running, and then you have Ethernode's data, which was removed, which basically showed a very different picture, because it basically looks at the whole network. It doesn't just look at the network that validators are connected to, because obviously we care most about what validators are connected to, because they're the ones proposing and attesting to blocks. They're the ones that are going to be potentially on the wrong chain if something was to go wrong here. So I totally understand why you would want to see this data instead of the whole network, which makes sense there. But I won't rehash kind of what I was saying there. But essentially, the reason why Geth is so sticky is because it's just such a reliable client, right? It's very reliable. Big staking entities love using it because of its reliability. It's been around the longest. It is, it's basically that old reliable, right? So I think you always go back to it. It's like how so many of us still use MetaMask, even though there are better wallets out there. Not to say that Geth, is a bad client or anything like that, but it's kind of that thing of, well, we go with what we're used to, we go with what we can rely on, what we can trust. And for these big staking providers, for them to switch, there's a cost there, right? There's a risk there. That's the cost, is the risk. And obviously, they don't want to take the risk if they don't have to. And I think that they don't believe the risks is very high of having Geth be dominant on the network, which I think is the wrong belief. But it's like a priority thing for them, where they basically look at, okay, well, what's the risk here? What's this risk? What's this risk? And then go down the priority list. But obviously, we would love to see this improve. But at the same time, if we can improve it without having to get people to run the different clients, and we can improve it in a way that Peter has kind of outlined here, that would be like the holy grail, basically. basically. And I think that that's what we're working towards with the Verge and Vertical trees and all that stuff there. But if we can do it before that without a hard fork, it would be really, really good to be able to do that. But yeah, you can check out the post for yourself and the discussions around it. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so I spoke about Smoothly, I think a couple of weeks ago, which is this concept of, or something that's launching, it's called which is an MEV smoothing pool for solo stakers. So essentially, you know how there are smoothing pools within Rocket Pool, and Lido also has like a smoothing of their rewards, and other big staking providers do this as well. Well, you know, why don't we have that for solo stakers? Well, that's because solo stakers obviously aren't one entity, right? There's nothing that you're not able to smooth over all of the solo stakers because solo stakers are independent node operators. So that's where Smoothly comes in, where it allows people to kind of opt into this this contract as solo stakers, or this system as solo stakers, and then have their rewards smoothed out. Now, of course, like if you're someone who likes to play the lottery of MEV, and you would love to just solo stake, and then you think you're going to be lucky enough to land one of those big MEV blocks, then you can go and do that, but your chances of that are extremely low, and I've basically outlined that plenty of times before. So the better thing to do, and I guess like the plus EV or plus expected value thing to do, would be to actually join Smoothly as a solo operator, because if one of the solo operators as part of Smoothly lands that block, then everyone kind of gets a share there, right? So it is kind of everyone working together for the benefit of everyone else, which I think is pretty cool. Now, the other part of Smoothly isn't just the smoothing rewards, but it's also something called Slide, which is something I think I mentioned a couple of weeks ago as well. But Slide stands for Social Layer Incentives for Decentralization. So by using Smoothly as a conduit, donations to Smoothly will accumulate alongside rewards from block proposals and be paid out to solo validators that opt in. So obviously this is a fully kind of, I guess, voluntary thing where people can make donations, entities can make donations, sort of like what they do with the Protocol Guild, you know, when these DAOs make donations to the Protocol Guild, or individuals do it. But the Slide initiative would do it for solo stakers. And I think this is just another really cool thing that they've added onto the whole Smoothly kind of application here, or the whole Smoothly system here, because it just increases the incentives for solo stakers, right? It increases the incentives for people to be solo stakers. And I think in the face of a bit of drama that I've seen lately about how Lido is launching their community staking module soon, and I think Lido is trying to do a vampire attack on solo stakers. Well, this is a good way to fight back against that, in terms of making the rewards as attractive and juicy as possible for solo operators, instead of getting them to funnel themselves into systems like Lido and other systems out there, because that's not good for the decentralization of the Beacon chain. So yeah, if you want to read more details about, I guess, like Smoothly and the MEV smoothing pool and Slide and all that, I'll link this in the YouTube description below for you to do so. But this is basically what it looks like. There's a nice little graphic here of what it looks like. You get the rewards from block proposals, you get the donations, they all go into this pool, and then it gets smoothed out over everyone that has opted in to this pool here. So I just think it's a very cool initiative. So you can go check this out. We'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, the rest of this episode is actually going to be about Layer 2. So a lot of Layer 2 news today, which was pretty cool, because I think that Layer 2s have kind of fallen out of favor lately with the wider crypto ecosystem. They seem to be flooding Layer 2s all the time, coming up with all sorts of weird narratives to me that I just look at and I'm like, what are people even going on about? Layer 2s have never been in a better position than what they are right now. They're killing it on the adoption side of things. The research and development is going very steady. You know, we have a major upgrade coming in Q1 that'll improve Layer 2s, obviously EIP 4844 or proto-dank sharding. So I'm seeing all this stuff on crypto Twitter, and I'm just like, wow, there's so much noise here. You know, I'm getting to the point now where I'm kind of thinking that my spending time on crypto Twitter is like completely negative for not just my mental health of having to deal with like reading all these bad takes, or these kind of just wrong takes, so to speak, but also the fact that it's just so toxic now. And I've been trying to use Farcaster more, but it's hard, because you obviously develop a habit for apps like Twitter, right? And obviously I use Twitter pretty heavily on the Refuel in order to get content, but at the same time I look at it and I'm just like, you know, why am I exposing myself to all of this stuff? It's just so much noise. Like, if you actually look at the fundamentals and what's being delivered, it has never been stronger, especially on the Layer 2 side of things. On that note as well, that's what I wanted to talk about over the next I guess like 20 minutes remaining of this episode. So the first thing is that that Nocturne, which is an on-chain privacy protocol, is now live on mainnet. Now, of course, this isn't live on layer 2s yet, but I expect it to be live on layer 2s, and it also falls into the whole privacy renaissance that's basically happening since the Tornado Cash sanctions, where we have Nocturne, and then we have Aztec, for example, which is a private privacy-focused layer 2, basically deploying and making privacy available to everyone here. Now, I do believe Nocturne does have plans to deploy this on layer 2s, but obviously deploying it first to mainnet is a smart move, just to get that initial kind of user base and that initial liquidity there. So you can go to app.nocturne.xyz to check this out and actually interact with it all here. But what is Nocturne? Well, basically, it's a way to do privacy on chain in a, I guess you could call it, compliant way. And I think I discussed this a few weeks ago when I first, or not when I first covered Nocturne, but when I covered, I think their funding announcement, or they did some blog posts where I basically said that doing compliance-focused privacy on chain is going to be an uphill battle, because when it comes to compliance, there are different jurisdictions around the world, right? Where essentially one jurisdiction is going to have sanctioned one country. So, for example, the US sanctioned Russia, it sanctioned North Korea, but the other countries aren't going to have those same sanctions. So, essentially, what happens is that, do you follow the US's regulations, or do you follow China's or Russia's, right? Like, when it comes to a global network like Ethereum, the default, in my opinion, should be that it's completely credibly neutral and you're not following anything. You're following the rules of the Ethereum protocol. Because if you try to follow the rules of extra Ethereum protocol, you run into this mess as I just described. And that was my main knock against, not Nocturne specifically, but against like compliant privacy protocols generally, because it's so subjective. It removes the objectivity of having just like, full on-chain privacy here, and add subjectivity to it. Not to say there's not value in this, but I really would, I'm kind of interested to see how this plays out over time, like what the end state of this looks like. Do people actually want to use it, even though there's that kind of risk there that they're going to essentially maybe be, not banned from the protocol, but something adverse was to happen here? I'm not sure. Like, we're gonna have to see how that shakes out. But that being said, as I said, you can check out this app for yourself. There is, funny enough, a disclaimer here that basically says, you take this disclaimer, right, and it says, I will not use this software in connection with money laundering, terrorism financing, human trafficking, sanctions evasion, or any other unlawful purposes. Okay, as I said, sanctions evasion, right? Like, there are people going to be in countries that are not evading sanctions of their country. They're evading sanctions of another country, right? For example, but they're not a citizen of that country. As I said, if you're a citizen of Russia, you're not evading the sanctions of the US on Russia by doing business within Russia. And it becomes so murky. I'm sure you guys can see. I'm not going to harp on about this, but it becomes such a murky thing, and I just don't know how it's workable at scale, but we're going to have to see how that plays out. But once you tick that and you agree to it, you can continue on here. I'm not sure if they have like an IP thing where they're barring US users or anything like that. Obviously, I'm not in the US and I'm not using a VPN right now, so I'm on my Australian IP. And if I was to kind of like connect and everything, I think I'm able to use this just fine. I'm able to deposit funds, transfer funds, swap assets, all that good stuff there. Let's see if I can actually connect my MetaMask here. I'm going to switch to mainnet on Sassel.eth and connect my MetaMask here and show you guys kind of what it looks like. Even in I think MetaMask, there's a kind of there's a connection request. I can just connect to the app here on MetaMask. I don't know how long it's going to take, or if it's going to kind of work here, and then I can obviously see my account balance and everything, and everything like that. Oh, okay. Nocturne installs a snap into MetaMask here, which is pretty cool actually. Snaps are extensions for MetaMask basically, and then I connect Sassel.eth to this, which it can obviously see my account balance and everything, and then I do a signature request as normal, sign, and there we go. Okay, I'm in now. I didn't do this before because I wanted to do it live on the show, but I'm connected. You can see here it's kind of loading my balances and stuff like that. It's got my account balance here. If I click on balances, it'll show me if I deposit funds. I can kick off my journey by depositing some ETH. I can swap, I can stake, I can do all this good stuff here. It's pretty cool that I can stake in a private way as well. But yeah, you can go play around with this yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But as I said, like you guys know I've been like a huge bull for like privacy and scaling. Those are my two major things within crypto. I think they go hand in hand. But I've become not bearish on privacy, but I've become kind of like cautious now where I'm like, okay, well, if the future of privacy on chain, it doesn't matter if it's on Ethereum or elsewhere, is privacy that has to comply with various kind of nation state regulations, then like, is it really real privacy? Because as I said, like, Ethereum is a global network. Ethereum is not just serving US users. It's not just serving, people in the EU or in Europe, right? It's serving everyone globally, and it's trying to do that in a credibly neutral, decentralized, censorship-resistant way where it doesn't favor any one person. You can be anywhere around the world and access Ethereum, right? You can be in the most heavily sanctioned country in the world, which I think is North Korea, and you can use Ethereum, and it's completely open. But of course, obviously, for various different reasons, the United States, for example, doesn't want anyone that they are allied with, doesn't want any of their citizens doing any business with North Korea, right? For example, or doing anything in connection with them. And that's totally fair from the US's perspective. Same with putting the sanctions on Russia and things like that, and for their geopolitical goals and everything. But at the end of the day, that's where the tension is. The tension is between Ethereum as a credibly neutral global network and then the apps building on top of Ethereum trying to fit the meat space, as we like to call them, or the real world regulations into a network that will allow you to do that, obviously, because Ethereum is permissionless. You can either make something compliant or completely centralized, or you can make it decentralized and completely non-compliant with anything and basically as credibly neutral as you want. But obviously Nocturne has gone down the path of compliance here, which, as I said, I don't blame them for at all. And I think that's actually a generally happy middle ground. But I think that it just becomes murky when you look at the fact that they're going to have to try and comply with regulations depending on where they are. And it's not just Nocturne, it's obviously other privacy apps out there. So yeah, and I'm very curious to see how that all shakes out over time. But yeah, anyway, I don't want to kind of like paint this in a negative light at all, but I do want to just caution against what I see the end state of this being and how I don't have the answers to this. It's more of I'm highlighting the issue now. Let's revisit it in a few years and see what happened with all the privacy protocols. But still cool, very cool to see Nocturne on mainnet here. You can go check this out for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so today ENS announced the launch of the EVM Gateway. Now, I think I covered this like a while ago on the Refuel. This has been in development for actually quite a while. And what this is basically a way to bring interoperability between L1 and L2 chains for ENS. And as ENS says here, it will be the foundation of our next generation of L2 resolvers and the first step in our L2 roadmap. So, of course, the EVM Gateway is open source, and it includes a generic CCIP read gateway framework and a Solidity library. It allows L1 smart contracts to fetch and verify state from other EVM chains, obviously L2s, efficiently and securely. And some of the features include a modular design allowing for trustless operations and simplicity. You can operate your own gateway or use an existing one. Plus, changing targets, the L2 you want to read from, is as easy as swapping a verifier contract address. The EVM Gateway is available for early use now on Optimism mainnet and Gurley, and the Optimism team has actually had a hand in building this here. Now, this goes back to what I was saying before about all this FUD around the fact that people are like, L2s break composability, they break interoperability, they're not able to communicate with each other as effectively and efficiently as like an L1 is. And there is so much wrong with that statement that it boggles the mind how much is wrong with that statement. If you're saying that and if you actually believe that, I would really, I don't think anyone listening to the Refuel believes that, right? But if you know someone who does, I would encourage you to encourage them to actually do their research and not just parrot whatever they see on crypto Twitter. Because if I'm being honest, I think 99% of the stuff that's said on crypto Twitter is absolute bullshit. It's just narratives. And as I said to you guys before, it's free to spin whatever narrative and story that you want. The cost comes when you go to deliver something, right? But taking it back to this narrative of, there's no interoperability or it breaks composability of L2s and things like that, that's completely false because we do have interoperability, right? We have interoperability with the bridges that are live today. Some of them are good, some of them are shit, right? It's just the way it is. And obviously they're not in their end state right now. They're working towards their end state. We have different types of bridges. We have liquidity bridges. We have bridges that have their own validator set, right? We have all these different types of things that are going on in that kind of ecosystem there. But the bridges are really pardon the pun here, but they're like a bridging step to the interoperability of the different of the various layer 2s when we eventually get things like the superchains that Optimism and Polygon are building. And I actually think that the superchain thesis is going to be the winning one for the simple fact that, remember I told you guys that I think that when it comes to generalized L2s, there would only be a handful of winners here. It'll follow a power law effect, right? So if that is going to be the reality, then a super chain, a super L2 of all the other L2s within an ecosystem talking to each other and being able to interoperate with each other is the, I guess, like holy grail of an L2. And of course, there's going to be various different super chains. Let's say we have like 5 super chains and within them you have like hundreds, if not thousands of different rollups, right? Different L2s. Well, those super chains are also going to be able to interoperate with each other. Yes, it may not be like totally composable in the sense of it won't be atomically composable, right? But it will be fast enough. It will be to bridge between them. It will be interoperable enough for basically 99% of users, right? And the ones that need more interoperability than that, honestly, they're probably like the whales and the bigger users out there, and they'll deal with it in various different ways, right? So, and that brings me to my kind of like grand unified thesis that I've been thinking about when it comes to L2s lately. And I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but I feel like I need to bring this up because it's been on my mind for like weeks now and I haven't had an opportunity to bring it up before. But my grand unified theory of like, not just L2s, but of what blockchains look like in their end state is that I think what the ecosystem, and I'm not just talking about Ethereum, I'm talking about broader crypto ecosystem generally, is basically going back to its roots of essentially blockchains doing what they do best, which is being a settlement layer. I truly believe that a blockchain is only good and only beneficial and its only use case is being a settlement layer, right? And then obviously L2s are blockchains as well, but the L2s are optimizing for computations and they're doing that technically off chain. And by off chain, I mean like off the L1. L1 doing computation, I'm very bearish on because for an L1 to be as decentralized, secure, robust, diverse, distributed, and as possible to become the best settlement layer, it cannot do everything. It needs to be hyper-focused on that thing. And because decentralization is actually an emergent property of all those other things, like for example, decentralization itself is not something you can create. It emerges from the properties that feed up to decentralization. And those properties include the security of the chain, right? The monetary asset of the chain, the client diversity, the credible neutrality of the chain, the diversity of the social layer, I'm just rattling off things as they come to my head right now, the censorship resistance of the chain, all that kind of stuff, right? Those things are the properties that give us decentralization. So if we optimize for all of those things, right, and with the singular goal of making the chain as decentralized as possible in order to become, again, the singular goal above that, to become the best settlement layer possible, then Ethereum, in my opinion, is the only chain optimizing for that in the best possible way. And then we can have the best of all worlds by basically not optimizing for computations on layer 1, but optimizing for computations on layer 2 and above from there, where they all settle down to layer 1. So you still get the trustlessness of the layer 1, but we've just kind of exported it to the layer 2s. That to me is the grand unified kind of theory of blockchains, where blockchains are these kind of like, I guess you could call them dumb things, where they do one thing really, really well. Like the layer 1 blockchain does settlement really, really well, and then it offloads all the other stuff to the layer 2s. That is my thesis on Ethereum. That is why I'm so bullish on Ethereum. That is what I think is going to be the big winner in the decades to come. I am very bearish on the monolithic design. Obviously, it can succeed, quote unquote, for a while, right? Because it's not just going to fail overnight or anything like that. And it may kind of carve a niche out here and there. But if we're talking about where most of the activity is going to concentrate, I do believe it's going to be these super chains and these general kind of like L2s and rollups and things like that all settle down to Ethereum as the best, most robust and secure settlement layer. But is Ethereum that today? No, I don't think so. Ethereum's got a lot of work to do at layer 1. But again, this is why Ethereum has pushed the computation, the execution, the scaling innovations mostly to layer 2, because we want to do as much as we can to make Ethereum as robust and secure as possible at layer 1 without being distracted by having to focus on these other things, because it's a huge lift, right? It's a very heavy lift, and it's an even heavier lift to try to do this in a decentralized, distributed open source way, because really everyone gets to see how the sausage is made and everyone is a critic, right? So when you're in that environment, it becomes even more difficult to kind of build that stuff. So I think that offloading that to the layer 2s where they all innovate, and then we can bring those innovations on layer 1 as necessary as well, is the best path forward. And that's my whole thesis, and that's my whole kind of belief. That's like a long-term thesis, guys. I'm not talking, this is not like the next year thing. This is a decades-long thesis that I have on this entire space, not just Ethereum, but on how the entire space is going to play out. And the last thing I'll say here, because I know I'm ranting a little bit here, but I felt like it was definitely important to go over this. The last thing I'll say here is that do not equate price action with fundamentals, right? Because if you equate price action with fundamentals, what you do is you basically define the thing that you're kind of bullish on based on what it's doing, what the price of the asset is doing. So if the price of the asset has gone up, you're suddenly more bullish on the tech, right? The fundamentals suddenly got better, which is not true, obviously, but like that's how you feel if you're just looking at price. And then when the price goes down, you start doubting your thesis. You're like, oh, am I wrong? Like, have I been wrong this whole time? What happened? Did the fundamentals get worse? Can the devs do something? You know, that's where that meme came from, right? When the price goes down, everyone's suddenly like, oh my God, the price is going down. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. That's just how markets work, right? And you have to be like more long-term minded. You can't just look at the short term. So I'd be very careful equating those two things, especially over the short to medium term. And I am of the strong belief that over the long term, in when it comes to price and markets, fundamentals play out. Because if you look at Bitcoin and Ethereum still being the top 2 assets by far, and still being the majority of the combined total crypto market cap, right? You can see that kind of play out there. But it's played out over longer cycles. I mean, to give you a perfect example, XRP flipped ETH in 2018, and that was like the top of the bull market, in the bull market before the last one. You know, XRP flipped ETH. Now, since then, XRP is down extremely bad against ETH. I mean, it's held its own against USD, of course, but like relatively, but like it's down really bad against ETH since then, right? And over its entire life cycle, it's down pretty bad against ETH. But just to illustrate my point about short to medium term price action is garbage. There is no signal there. Long term is where you get the signal. But at the same time, you should not define your thesis on your favorite project or your favorite chain, whatever it is, based on its price action. You should define it based on the actual fundamentals, because the price rarely reflects the fundamentals over the short to medium term. I would say it probably never does over the short to medium term, but over the long term, most of the time it does, and I truly do believe that. But anyway, enough of that little mini rant there. You can go check out ENS's EVM gateway for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so L2 Beat has announced a new feature during their talk at the L2 Days event at DevConnect. So they've got a brand new Liveness page that is officially live on the L2 Beat website. You can check it out. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But basically what this is, as L2 Beat describes it, they basically say the dashboard that we've built includes information for both batch submissions for transaction data rollups and state updates. The average interval shows how often L2 transaction data or state routes make their way to the L1. The max interval is the longest time without activity. So if you go to this dashboard, you can see what the batch submission interval is for the different L2s, and what it is for not just batch submissions, but state update intervals over the last 30 days on average, and over the last 30 days, what the max time was. So you can see here that most of them, in terms of their 30-day average, in terms of batch submission intervals, are under an hour. Actually, most of them are under 10 minutes. And you know, the biggest ones like Arbitrum 1, OP mainnet, and base right now are a couple of minutes at most, right? And then you can see the state update intervals, depending on what they are. If they're an optimistic rollup or a ZK rollup, it changes, but they're all under an hour, about an hour or less, or most of them are an hour or less. And then that's the average. And then you can see what the max time is, and how long it took, you know, between how long it took within the last 30 days to post a batch or post a state update interval. When it comes to like the top 3 here, for the batch submission, it was 11 minutes, 6 minutes, and 30 minutes as the longest periods here. And that can happen for any number of reasons. It depends on the actual L2 itself, but one of the reasons it can happen is because maybe the gas fees spike really high, and they basically have a system in place that says, wait till the gas fees come down a little bit before we do this, because we'd just basically be overpaying for security if we were to publish this. That should actually go away mostly with ERP4844 when they're using blob transactions instead of call data, because of the fact that the blob transactions are going to be a separate fee market to call data, which is shared with the rest of the Ethereum L1 transactions. So that kind of spiking there should definitely go away. But yeah, anyway, this dashboard I think is really, really cool because it basically shows you what the, I guess, settlement time or time to settlement is for the various different L2s on Ethereum. And you can go check this out for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, Lattice, which is a team building autonomous worlds, has announced their own L2 today called Redstone. Now, the funny thing about this is that this L2 is actually using the plasma construction or the plasma exit games that I talked about yesterday that Vitalik highlighted. So they're calling Redstone a plasma-inspired alt-DA chain built on the OP stack. So essentially the TLDR of what it is, you can see here, Redstone operates like a traditional optimistic rollup, except instead of posting the input state to L1, we post a data commitment hash. This allows us to achieve massive cost savings as input data makes up the majority of a rollup's cost. So technically it's still kind of like a Validium or an Optimium. I think they're called Optimiums when they're an optimistic rollup that stores data off chain, but it's doing it in a kind of like different way where it's storing the data commitment hash kind of like on chain here, and then using off chain data availability, I believe. As you can see here, they say to ensure the input state corresponding to the input commitment is available for data availability, there is a data availability challenge contract on L1, which allows anyone to submit a challenge to a data commitment in case the provider misbehaves. So that's exactly what Vitalik was talking about yesterday, I believe, with his resurrection of the plasma exit games here. And you can see here that the challenge system that Lattice has designed for Redstone is actually already permissionless, meaning that any commitment can be challenged by any user. Any honest actor on the internet can enforce the availability of the chain. And the coolest thing about this is the fact that Vitalik only posted about this yesterday, and he's obviously been working on this with the Redstone team, or at least with the OP kind of labs team on this. So it's very cool to see that there's already an implementation live out in the wild here. But yeah, anyway, you can go check out this announcement for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, just a tweet that I wanted to show you guys today, which is in reply to a tweet from Eric Wall here, where basically he quote tweets Udi saying that L2s on Ethereum don't make sense. DeFi loses liquidity, network effects, blah, 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 right? All the stuff that I was talking about earlier. And then Eric Wall says, I can't disagree with this. The L2s are not without their problems. Of course, they're not without their problems, right? They're not perfect, but Patrick McCrory here, who works at Off-Chain Labs, put together a really great reply to this, basically talking about how he sees the future of L2s playing out on Ethereum here. Now, I'm not going to read this. I just wanted to highlight it for you guys. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But really, the TLDR is that he sees all of these different kind of entities within the world, making their own L2s, kind of interoperating with each other, being able to basically push their customers to self-custody to be able to use on-chain things and not have to custody all their customer assets themselves and stuff like that. But anyway, you can go read this tweet for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But I think I'm over time there. And actually, funny thing, my computer froze about not halfway through the recording, just before actually, about a couple of minutes ago. And I was like praying that my video got saved because I wasn't going to do the refuel again. So there was almost a rug fuel today, guys, because I didn't want to have to do it again after doing that, basically the whole episode and then losing all of the content. But no, the content's there. OBS saved it for me. Thank God for that. But yeah, anyway, that's it for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.